Hello and welcome to another Moog demo library. In today's video, we're going to explore Muse, and in particular, we're going to take a look at the Arpeggiator section. Now, the Arpeggiator is different from the sequencer because the sequencer exists outside of the patch structure, but the Arpeggiator settings are stored per patch so that you can set a different Arpeggiator style and rhythm for every patch that you store in Muse. Now, to begin, I'm going to turn the Arpeggiator on, and I'm going to hit the hold button in the left-hand controller, which is going to serve as my latching function for the ARP. I have the direction set to order, which means that the ARP is going to create a pattern in the order that I enter notes. And I have the octave range set to 1. So let's play some notes and let the ARP start running. So you can hear with order, it's just playing back the pattern that I entered in the order that I entered notes. I can select the pattern mode on direction. And by default, what that's going to give us is just a simple ascending ARP, but there's all sorts of different options for how the pattern works that can be set in the More menu, and we will cover that in a later video. I can also select random, and then it's just going to randomly pull from the selection of notes that I entered. I can increase the octave range. In the case of random, what that's going to do is just increase the number of notes that it can randomly pull in by giving us the first octave and the second octave. I can select pattern, and now what it's going to do is play through the ARP pattern and then move up an octave and play through that same pattern in the higher octave and then return. And the same thing will happen in the order direction mode. I can also increase the octave range to 3 and then 4. Now there's a few different ways that octave movement can actually work with the Arpeggiator, and that can be set in the More menu, but we will be covering that in a later video. Now additionally here, I can turn on the forward back button to get a pendulum motion. And now what's going to happen is it's going to play through the whole ARP pattern, and then it's going to reverse and play the whole ARP pattern backwards and keep going back and forth like that. While I'm here, I can also set the clock division that the ARP is moving at. And they're all going to be musical divisions of our master tempo, set either by the tempo or an external tempo coming in. And in the More menu, we can actually determine which musical divisions that the clock div knob is able to hit. Currently, you can notice that it's only hitting straight divisions. But if I wanted to have triplet divisions or dotted divisions, I could have it only hit those, or I can have it hit a combination of straight, dotted, and triplet divisions. Now additionally, we can look at the ARP view. And here we can see that there's a chase light moving through the 16 steps. And what I can do here is actually create a rhythm for my ARP to follow. And I can just add rests here by turning notes off. I can control the length of my rhythm in the length box. So I can shorten it to be, say, 12 steps. But I can also increase it beyond 16 up to 64 notes, but I'm going to set it to 32. And now to access the additional pages of 16 steps, we use the page function in the sequencer. So this is my second set of 32 steps, and I'm going to add some rests onto this page as well. Now, at any time, if you want the ARP to reset from step 1, we can just hit the reset button. So that's just a nice way to always be able to reset the ARP to step 1 of the rhythm. I can control the gate length. And you're just going to have a uniform gate length for every single step that's set using this gate length setting. So this just allows me to determine how long it's going to hold a step, and depending on the patch, this can have a more dramatic or more subtle effect. I can also control the probability of gates, so even though I've programmed rests, I can also add random rests in by setting a probability that a note will occur. So right now it's at 100%, meaning all notes will always occur, but let's say I set it to 85%. Then what I wind up with is some random rests in addition to the rests that I've programmed in. Now the rest behavior allows an interesting option for both the program and the probabilistic rests separately from each other. And what we can select is when a note is rested, The pitch that should have fallen on that step is either shifted to the next step or it's skipped over. By default, it's going to be shifted to the next step so that you always hear all the notes in the ARP pattern. But if I turn on rest skip, then any rests that I've programmed will skip the note that should have occurred on that step. So I won't hear every note in my ARP pattern on repeats. And I can also determine whether the probabilistic rests shift or skip the note also, and by default they also shift the note, but I can set it so that my program rests shift the note while the random rests skip the note. This can just be a nice way to play with the arpeggiator pattern that you have developed. Now, once I hear something that I like, we have what's called the lock function. So in this box, we can set the lock loop length, which is how long we want a lock to occur. And so right now it's set to 16 steps, and I'm going to go ahead and engage it. So what this is going to do is hold the last 16 steps that we heard in a buffer so that it plays back exactly the same. And if we have it set to, say, random mode, or we have random rests occurring, it's going to ignore that information and simply play back whatever was last heard so that you can kind of capture lightning in a bottle if you heard something that you liked and you want it to persist. Now, one really useful thing about the lock loop is even though it says 16 steps, it's actually always going to store a buffer of 64 notes. So while it's locked, I can extend the length of the loop. And one really nice thing is while it's locked, I can actually play a different set of notes, and I can even change the direction setting as well as the octave range. And then when I let go of lock, what's going to happen is my new arpeggiation pattern that I have set up is going to play. But another thing that I can do is just capture a few notes and then add them into the lock by just releasing it for a moment and then re-engaging it. So the lock can actually serve as a really nice way to have a scratch pad to build up ideas for sequences. And one really convenient thing is once I have something that I like, I can actually record the arpeggiator into the sequencer and then turn this into a sequence which I can edit really deeply or add notes or add chords or do any sort of interesting thing. But as you can see, the arpeggiator is a really, really powerful compositional tool to help you work on ideas as you are playing and designing sounds on Muse.